Oh, okay, so maybe we can start. Okay. Thank you for being here at lunchtime. And so I'm Carola Frediani. We are going in English, right? Yeah. I'm Carola Frediani. I'm a journalist from La Stampa, and I cover, cybersecurity, hacking, and I'm here with Federico Maggi, who is a security researcher from Trend Micro. And today we are talking about a case which had a lot of relevance in Italy, because if you remember, the beginning of January this year, two Italians, Giulio and Francesca Maria Occhionero, referred to as the Occhionero brothers, have been arrested and accused of using malware that was codenamed EyePyramid to orchestrate a cyber espionage campaign to spy on high-profile Italian politicians and businessmen. So when the news broke, it got a lot of media attention because of the names listed in the court order. Most of them appeared from the beginning to be just a potential target, not real victims, not really being hacked, or at least there was not evidence in the court order. Among these, there were like former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi and President of the European Central Bank, former Governor of Bank of Italia, Mario Draghi. So because of these names, despite the fact that in the court order there was no evidence of the hacking of such profiles, most headlines and attention focused on the high-level potential victims, letting people think that all the listed names were being hacked. And I think this is also a little media case study, like how things at the beginning, when a news breaks in, could go a little bit wrong. But now we are here because while the news was still developing, some security researchers focused on the most interesting part of the news, maybe together with the psychological profiles of the two main suspects. That was the malware, right? And actually also the Italian investigation was based, or at least kicked off, from an analysis of the malware. So in the aftermath of the news, some researchers from Reacta, Trend Micro, and later on also Kaspersky, TGSoft, just to cite the most relevant in the case, started searching for samples of the malware and collecting it and analyzing it. Federico Maggi, a researcher in Trend Micro, was among this group of dedicated cyber investigators, and he actually kept digging into the malware and into the samples, even after the news went under the radar. You actually collected like 250 samples at the end of this malware. Yeah. So maybe you can start explaining us a little bit what you did and why, what did you find? And also maybe you can explain us what is also a sample, a malware sample, because maybe,
Yeah. So, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks also from my side to being here at lunchtime. I'm also hungry. So, first I think we should talk about what happened in the infection, right? So, then I will explain what the malware is and what a malware sample is and how we, usually dig into these cases. So this is this is a reconstruction of potential phishing email that you could have received if you were one of the targets of EyePyramid. There is some text which is anonymized because we as Trend Micro, we don't keep the body of the email, we only keep the attachments in our products. This is one of the real senders. Of course, it's a fake sender, it's a spoof sender. And this is an example subject that was used during the campaign. There was an attachment which, could be like a fake PDF file or a fake PDF file, right? But in the end, what it was an executable file. So something that if you click on it and if your computer is not protected enough, it will simply execute and do some damage. So this is an example of a sample of a malware. So one instance of a malware family. In this case, the malware family, when you hear the term malware family, it's EyePyramid in this case. And this is a sample of this. So generally, the scheme of infection was something like this. So you might wonder where this name comes from, right? Di Marco Gianmaria, right? It's one of the initial compromised email accounts. So the way the EyePyramid campaign used to work is that the attackers or whoever was behind this scheme collected an initial list of compromised accounts to use them as a first hook to send the victim something from a trusted origin, right? So if you receive an email from a friend, although it looks odd, although it contains a name that in the attachment that is not really convincing, it comes from a friend of yours, so maybe you click on it. So this is how the initial high-profile targets were compromised, and then of course the malware starts to do damage, execute, and exfiltrate the data that it wanted to exfiltrate. So we talked about what a sample is. We talked about what a malware is.
Maybe you can go on explaining
I can go on explaining.
Yeah, because I think it's
You think it's okay?
Yeah.
So, for example, what you see here in the here, I don't know if you see the cursor. Anyways, nearby number 6, right? What you have is that there are another level of compromised victims that were used once again from the malware to automatically spread to the high-profile victims. So the attacker behind the scene programmed the malware to target high-profile victims, but also to collect other email address that could be used, as the infection was going on to send emails out. So it was not really a self-propagating malware, so it wasn't programmed to self-propagate, but it was programmed to collect evidence that could be used also for further infections.
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, when the the investigation, made by prosecutors started at the beginning of apparently at the beginning of 2015, and it starts after ENAV, which is like the Italian air flight control company, got this suspicious email coming from a legal firm that actually had already been compromised. So exactly, the way it was propagating this.
And
there were a lot of legal firms at the beginning being compromised.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes. So usually, if you receive an email from your lawyer, if you receive an email from whoever takes care of your, private business or anything, you usually trust that guy, right? So I think this was one of the most distinctive aspects of the spear-phishing campaign. And the term spear-phishing is to denote the fact that the attacker was not going for, mass infections. It was going for a very targeted type of infection. So, I think this image makes a difference between spear phishing and, mass phishing. Although spear phishing is usually used for in advanced and sophisticated campaigns, I don't feel like I can say that EyePyramid was a highly sophisticated campaign. There was a very well elaborated spear phishing strategy behind the scene, but technically speaking, it was just a malware. I mean, nothing as advanced as what we see in like state-sponsored espionage, right? Nothing compared to that. You also asked me something about how we usually analyze this kind of, how we, start the investigation.
Yeah, how do you start the investigation in these cases? I mean, how do you find samples? And how do you, what you do with them?
Yeah.
I mean, in an easy explanation.
Yeah. So this all started, I mean, I'm going to tell you my story of this particular sample. So this started in around January 10th, when the court order was published. Actually, I got copies of the court order off the records. They started to circulate into private conversation groups and private chats that we as experts we use to talk with our peers. So there were lots of rumors about where this court order was, I mean, when it will be published, right? So this was the afternoon. And I think a few hours later, the AGI published an article describing the first impressions and the first results out from this court order. And my reaction was, well, let's skip this now. my reaction is that, oh, wow, this court order contains a lot of technical details for being a court order, right? We usually don't see such great details of like emails, passwords, all sorts of things. So I started exactly from this technical details to find in our repositories and in VirusTotal, which is like you can think of it as a big tank containing previous malware samples. I used this evidence as keys to search for other samples containing this evidence. So I was looking for malware that was targeting the same email addresses, that was containing particular strings that were found in the EyePyramid malware according to the investigators, and so on and so forth. So at a certain point, as Carola mentioned, there was a lot of buzz around this. Like in a matter of hours, the news were crazy about it. Oh, Matteo Renzi account was compromised, and what's going on. And so my friends also started to comment on Facebook. So I said, it was probably midnight by then, and so I say, okay, let's put together a list of cold, boring, but at least true facts that we know about EyePyramid, and distill them in a simple page so my friends at least can understand what's going on for real. At some point then, I decided to move this note on Facebook somewhere else. But what I did is I extracted all that technical evidence and I put it from the technical order, and I put it on a page. And then it started to get retweeted like crazy. People were mentioning me because I was one of the first to put only technical evidence out and not just the speculation.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
Because there were some things about this. I mean, the malware was kind of new. I mean, not known, like its identity was not known.
Yeah, the identity was not known,
okay.
but the malware itself was known.
Then we can also talk about these two aspects. The identity of the malware was not known until that moment, but the malware itself was, kind of, maybe a repackaging or,
Yeah.
And also, but this went on for years, actually. The most shocking part of this EyePyramid campaign was that it went on for years without being detected.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we can address some of these aspects.
Yes, as a result of this search of samples, I found like 250 samples, and I started to put a date. To put a date and time on these samples, so to tell when these samples have been forged, created. And as you can see from this graph, the majority of the samples were from 2014, and indeed this was later confirmed to be one of the most active years for the attackers. But some samples were as old as 2010, and I even have a couple of them 2008. So the samples mean, again, if you remember what I told at the beginning, is just an instance of family of a malware. The family was unnamed in the sense that we didn't give a name to that up to this point, but now that all these EyePyramid case came out, we put the name EyePyramid on the sample. And if we go back, we found a lot of samples that were still EyePyramid in the sense they were sharing many similarities, if not identical, to the ones of 2014. And this was interesting because this also crosses other investigations cases from 2010, 2011. So yes, it turns out that sometimes antiviruses make mistakes, sometimes antiviruses do not detect malware, and it also happens that antiviruses and security products are unable to see old variants of, new variants of old malware, like in this case.
Can I ask you about this, about the antivirus?
Yes.
Could have been that because this campaign was, in a way, was a small campaign as for the number of the targets. So this could be a reason for not being detected?
Not really, in the sense that, when a sample is reported to a company, such as Trend Micro and anyone else works in this business, we take care of that in the sense that we put it in our repositories and we write a detection for that. And even if it's just one sample, if it's reported to us, we take it, right? It's not that if it's not huge, we just discard it, no. So I think this is not the problem of, the fact that it was
no, I mean that no one reported, the fact that no one ever reported it or,
No, because we had signatures which were as old as 2010, 2011 for these malware. Of course, it was not named EyePyramid. So if you happen to have found a sample of EyePyramid and before January 2017, you search for EyePyramid, you wouldn't find anything in our repositories because it wasn't named after EyePyramid. So it wasn't it didn't have any attached label called EyePyramid. But it was there. It was different name. It was slightly different code, not as different. It was not exactly the same, and that's why it wasn't detected. Right?
Yeah.
So the attacker found some ways, as usual, to to change the code to make it not obvious to analyze, but still analyzable. But this was sufficient. It flew under the radar for a while. Also because there were, not development effort behind it, but the attackers were busy trying to make it look different, right? Not in a very sophisticated way, but they were continuously changing it, right, superficially.
Yeah, but there was also another aspect which was very interesting in this case. It was that there was circumstantial evidence of the possible authors, or anyway, someone, a name connected to the malware itself.
Yes.
And yeah, could you
This is
speak about
very
this?
odd.
Yeah.
This is very odd. It's very strange. Normally, it takes at least. In the big investigation cases, like big hacks, it takes years to put a name on the attacker. This time, the name of the attacker came with a malware. The malware came with the name of the attacker. In the sense there was not strong evidence, but there was a license key. Is this what you were referring to? There was a license key. So I have a slide of this.
You have many slides.
Yes, I have many slides, but I knew I would have used only a few of them. So as part of this malware, of course, after a malware like this starts to execute and steal data, you need also to exfiltrate the data. So you need what we call exfiltration channel. One of the exfiltration channels of this malware was email. So instead of sending out the stolen data using sophisticated protocols, it would simply send out emails to the attackers. And in order to send out emails, it was using this component, which is a library to send email. So when you build a software that needs to send email, you need a component to send out email. And this is what the attacker or the author of the malware was using, the mailb.net objects, which is a commercial product. It happens to be a commercial product. And of course, when you need a commercial license to use it in your software, you have to buy it, right? So it turns out that whoever was behind this malware purchased the license under the name of Giulio Occhionero, and probably Giulio Occhionero was the one who made this purchase, we don't know. But at least this was enough for the investigators. And it left the license key in the malware. So if you open the malware, you find this license key, you call after logic, and you say, hey, do you know this license key? It's yours. Can you tell me who is the name who have made the purchase? Of course, it's Giulio Occhionero. But first, they have to call them. And this is what happened. After Logic, which is the one who made this commercial product, after responding to an investigator saying, hey, this is Giulio Occhionero's purchase, they also called Giulio Occhionero to say, hey, I got an email from the FBI. You probably want to, do something about it.
It seems really kind of, I don't know, it seems a big mistake, but how big, to what extent? Did he have to leave the code in the software? So the mistake was to leave the code there or to get it with his name from the beginning?
The big mistake was to purchase this component under a name, right? He could have used a fake identity. He could have used another component, not commercial. He could have used an open source component.
So he could have used an open source
Of course, yeah, he could have used an open source component for which you don't need a license, a name on the license. Leaving the key is not a big mistake. I mean, in the sense, you have to leave it there in some way. If you use a commercial product that needs a license key to work, you have to put the license key, maybe well hidden, better hidden than he did, but you have to leave it there.
Okay.
I think the root mistake was to,
to buy it or
to buy that. There were other mistakes, but this was one of them.
Well, actually, there were also some domains associated with this name. So
yes,
maybe.
And this is probably my favorite slide. As I said, there were different exfiltration channels. One of them is email, and one of them is also other, regular protocols to send out data to other domains. And it turns out that this is a list of what you see on the top, and also including what you see in the bottom. This was the list of domains that were found in the malware, right? And interestingly enough, whoever registered these domains, they also opted for what is called a private registration, in the sense that you can register a domain without leaving your name and last name to the public, right? So when you do whois, carolafrediani.com, I don't know if that domain even exists, you might have opted for a private registration. Of course, for carolafrediani.com doesn't make a lot of sense because the name is also on the domain, right? And this is exactly what happened in this case. So these guys purchased Occhionero.com using a private registration.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. I also have done that, but also only because my provider forces me to do. So I have maggi.cc, which is my last name.cc, but my provider forces me, so to speak, to purchase privately registered domain. So this could also be the case, that they registered with a provider that sort of makes it easy to opt for a private registration. But I mean, the slide says it all. I mean, they were trying to hide their traces, or I don't know. It happens that they purchased domains with a private registration, but then here you register Occhionero.com, Occhionero.info, and the last one is very interesting, Westlands.com. Westlands.com is the website of Westlands, one of the companies of Giulio Occhionero. And there was an email found in the malware at westlands.com.
Okay.
So
really, to pin down the connection between the Occhionero Westland domains to the domains associated with the malware, the connection was?
The connection was, now it's not like that anymore in the sense that things change, like in the domain to IP address resolution, things can change, right? So, but by the time of the investigation, if you started looking at this domain, one of these ones at the top, any of these, right? They were all connected together in the sense they were all using the same mail server. So when you register a domain, you also, as part of the registration information, you have to put information on which is the email address, the email server that handles email for that. So if I send you an email to info@inasrl.com, there must be information on who is the email server in charge of handling email for that. And it looks like all of these domains were using the same, at some point they were using the same mail server. So this was the connection that was made. In the malware, of course, there was not occhionero.com, occhionero.info. There was one of these domains, which I don't exactly remember which one it was, but they were all easily connected together. So if you found one of the domains here, like the first one, you could connect it to westlands.com or occhionero.info, right? So it was not a direct connection, but it was very easy to make.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's been a very weird case in a way, but at the same time, people do make mistakes, So it's not impossible also to think of all this as someone not having a clear vision of the possible consequences of tracing him.
It looks to me of someone who hasn't the handle of the situation. Someone who, he needed a domain, for example, and I mean, in my mind, I'm picturing this guy going to someone and say, hey, can you purchase a domain for me? And then this someone had purchased the domain, but it happened that all the domains that this guy is purchasing are with the same ISP, and he also had westlands.com before, and he didn't, make the connection and say, oh, if I purchase a domain from the same ISP, I'm going to use the same mail server, so they could trace back to me. So it seems to me that the guy didn't make, the connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, an expert wouldn't have made these mistakes.
Of course, we are just analyzing the digital, traces. We don't know if, the two Occhionero brothers are are the authors have been framed in some way. Just to be clear that, but we can say that looking just at the information we have from the malware and the court orders and so on, there are some, it's an interesting case also for, as a cyber investigation maybe.
Yes, it's strange. And as a matter of fact, after I came out with the technical analysis on Trend Micro's blog, without even knowing, the director of our team wrote a piece called something like EyePyramid and the lesson learned on attribution. And the key point of the story was that usually in cybercrime investigation it's very hard, it's very difficult to make attribution. It's very difficult because it is technically difficult, and it's also difficult because it's a very, sensitive matter. When you put a name on a cybercrime case, you're doing something that you have to be very sure about, because it's quite, you can send people to jail. But in this case, we learned the opposite. After a few days spent analyzing the malware, I could trace back to these guys as well.
But
there were many oddities indeed.
Also, we have to say the Occhionero brothers say that they are innocent and that they've been framed and they've been hacked. Right, so it's really a kind of inception story actually, because they are accused of this hacking espionage campaign. They say that they've been hacked. Investigators actually use Trojans also for the investigation. So it's a very complex story. And are there other oddities or other interesting parts?
Yeah, before going to the other oddities, not that I'm saying that this is how it happened, but technically speaking, what you say is just possible. I mean, it is possible that someone could have compromised the Occhionero brothers' computers and used that to do the activities that they performed, right? Here there is also, during the investigations, the police was, how can I say, appostamenti, do you have the translation for that? They were outside their house, making sure that they were inside their house while looking at their computers. So the investigators could confirm that the Occhionero brothers were in their apartment, their house, while they were looking, using a Trojan on their computer, looking at what they were doing. So it's like the policeman was sitting here, looking at them, sort of using the computer. There is also another explanation, because they were not technically inside their house. They were outside their house. So it could be very well, I'm not saying this is how it went, but technically it is possible that if their computer was infected with a Trojan, not the investigators' Trojans, but another Trojan, it could be very well that they were inside the house, not looking at their computer, and the computer was used by someone else perpetrating the actual crime. Of course, this is very stretching. I'm just stretching the bits, but technically it's possible. Right?
Yeah.
And they say they've been framed, so we don't know.
Yeah.
Other oddities, yes. This is an oddity. Well, not really an oddity, but something that is making me reflecting. This is something that came out after the third day of investigation. There is this site who is maintained by friends of mine and friends of many people who are in this room, I guess. Anyways, this site can help you doing a quick analysis of an executable. So if you have an executable and you're not sure if it's malicious or not, you can upload it on this website, and the website will do some magic, some technical magic to analyze it. So it will tell you, for example, if it's recognized by some antiviruses. It will tell you if it performs any malicious activity, right? So you could get a first triage for that. And the interesting thing is that I found that there was a sample correlated to EyePyramid. I was sure it was EyePyramid. And during the investigation, this sample kind of disappeared, in the sense that no one I've asked to did have this sample. So I asked my colleagues, I asked my friends, I asked law enforcement, I asked lots of people. None of them had this sample. I knew it was there because at some point it was uploaded on this website, and exactly in 2014, October, it was uploaded there, and the name made me reflect a little bit. It was stop.clean.exe. And the interesting thing is that none of the antiviruses reported this as malicious. So it means that someone, and I know this someone was from Italy, uploaded a sample on malware.com. This sample is related to EyePyramid. I know for sure it's related to EyePyramid because it contains the same email addresses that are related to EyePyramid. So I have strong evidence that says that this sample is EyePyramid. And by 2014, no antiviruses was able to detect this specific executable. The name was stop.cleaned, so there are at least two interpretations. Either it is actually clean in the sense that it's disarmed, so it doesn't work, or that it's clean in the sense that the attacker was making sure that no antiviruses could detect this.
But is it normal for like an attacker using this kind of services to check? Okay.
It is normal for an attacker to make sure that their products are good, they're not detected by any antiviruses before spreading them. It is not normal for an attacker to use a public service to do this. There are equivalent of these services in the underground, in the dark web, that you can do these kind of things anonymously without leaving any trace. There is also another explanation that it was the GNIPIC doing the investigation, or some other investigators, one of the first investigators, the Mental Society, who had the first sample and they wanted to upload it to malware.com to see if it was actually a malware, but I cannot picture an investigator using malware.com professionally. I mean, it's a good service, it works well, but investigators working on a secret case or on a sensitive case, I wouldn't have used malware.com. So it looks like more like either a mistake or the attacker checking it. I mean, not a very smart attacker.
And also, but there are other audits. Like you also received people contacted you. You received also another email apparently related to this case after you've been, like public talking about the case and analyzing it.
After the first release, we published 2 blog posts, and after the first one, I got an email from this Nick Bucks, I guess, saying, hello Federico, nice work on EyePyramid. This whole case is very interesting and strange. I found some weird details regarding this email address from your report. By the way, this email address is not only from my report, I found it also on the court order. So the guy says, this email address, lu_1974 this email has been used to register for a few dating websites. And then he goes on and say, Giulio Occhionero also used his @westlands.com email address to register for the same dating sites. And the guy went even further. He says, below here, there is the data. So he sent me the data that he had pulled out from leakedsource.com to save you $5. So he paid $5 as $4 just to save me the $4. And he sent me the details. So like, I really want you to look at this data, right? So if he was just curious about it, he could have just said, hey, have you looked at this? I found something on leaked source you might want to check. No, he went to leaked source. He purchased access. He paid $4. You have to use Bitcoin, by the way. So he purchased $4 worth of Bitcoin to extract this data and sent this data to me. And then he said, maybe it's just a coincidence because this account is also registered elsewhere. Or maybe he says there is a mistake on the court order that instead of hotmail.com is actually hotmail.it. So
like, but to explain what,
yes, now I'm going to explain what this means. Right?
He pretended this to mean.
He pretended to me. So leakedsource.com, for those that do not know it, is a website that anyone can use to upload leaks. So data leaked somehow. And especially passwords and usernames leaked. And this guy used it to go through all these email address, and he found out that this email address was found in one of the leaks of the many dating sites who are unfortunately known to leak data.
So there was a password.
There was a username and a password associated to this email address in some of these dating sites. And it turns out that, as far as he says, Giulio Occhionero has used the very same dating sites to register accounts under his name. Because he said Giulio has used his @westlands.com email address to register on the same website. So the interpretation of this is that if you really want to make like another very stretched story, is that someone could have used the data from leakedsource.com, username and passwords, to impersonate Giulio Occhionero or whoever. And maybe if they were really lucky, the email account that were leaked, they were using, the people behind these email accounts, they were reusing passwords on other like services. So they maybe were lucky to find access to other websites thanks to this leak. And interesting, I mean, this guy is real. I mean, as far as I know, is real. But what makes it very strange is that this guy is a PhD student in medicine. So I was like, why are you going to such an extent of interest, digging into this? And I also checked a little bit about the information on the email header to do some superficial analysis to at least make sure that the email was not completely spoofed. And I also sent him an email. I sent him an email and say, hey, thanks for your, $4 spent on leaked source. Thanks for, reporting this to me. Can you tell me a little bit more? Can you tell me how do you know that Giulio email was used on the same dating website? Because I cannot find evidence on that. And he never replied me. This was January 16. The email was not bounced back, so the email is real. And he didn't send me a note saying, I have no idea what you're talking about, so I don't know. I mean, this is just another oddity, yeah.
Maybe it was just fascinated by
the
case. There are people sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, yes. Probably,
we don't know.
Yeah. What? What do you mean? Okay. Yeah. Probably, yes. I don't know. I mean, I found him on LinkedIn. His profile looks legitimate. He also has a Twitter handle with the same NBEX nickname. So I don't know. It's just weird. We cannot draw any conclusion, of course, from this, but it was, just interesting.
Yeah, but it was a case that he had some international.
There were routers covered it.
Yeah, I mean, especially because at the beginning it seemed, to impact on very high-profile politicians. But I mean, if you have to define the whole this whole cyber espionage campaign, this phishing campaign, and to say how much, to what extent was sophisticated, to what extent, how many efforts did it take to do it? I mean, how would you define it? Is it something affordable for just 1-2 people? Did it need high-level skills? I mean,
it was rather simple in the sense that this is nothing, nothing compared to sophisticated attacks. To put together the malware, yes. I mean, to actually code the malware, some skills were needed, programming skills, not hacking skills. So he could have, or she could have, put together the malware code, or they could have simply purchased it, like in some underground forums or underground marketplaces. They could have just purchased it. So there was no evidence about the effort to make it, right?
Okay, so maybe we can start. Okay, thank you for being here at lunchtime. And so I'm Carola Frediani. We are going in English, right? Yeah. I'm Carola Frediani. I'm a journalist from La Stampa, and I cover, cybersecurity, hacking, and I'm here with Federico Maggi, who is a security researcher from Trend Micro. And today we are talking about a case which which had a lot of relevance in Italy, because if you remember, the beginning of January this year, two Italians, Giulio and Francesca Maria Occhionero, referred to as the Occhionero brothers, have been arrested and accused of using malware that was codenamed EyePyramid to orchestrate, just to cite the most relevant in the case, started searching for samples of the malware and collecting it and analyzing it. Federico Maggi, a researcher in Trend Micro, was among this group of dedicated cyber investigators, and he actually kept digging into the malware and into the samples, even after the news, went, under the radar. You actually collected like 250 samples at the end of this malware. Yeah. So maybe you can start, explaining us a little bit what you did and why, what did you find, and also maybe you can explain us what is also a sample, a malware sample, because maybe
Yeah. So, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks also from my side to being here at lunchtime. I'm also hungry. So, first I think we should talk about what happened in the infection, right? So, and then I will explain what the malware is and what a malware sample is and how we, usually dig into these cases. So this is this is a reconstruction of potential phishing email that you could have received if you were one of the targets of EyePyramid. There is some text which is anonymized, because we as Trend Micro, we don't keep the body of the email, we only keep the attachments in our products. This is one of the real senders. Of course, it's a fake sender, it's a spoof sender. And this is an example subject that was used during the campaign. There was an attachment which, could be like a fake
cyber espionage campaign to spy on high-profile Italian politicians and businessmen. So when the news broke, it got a lot of media attention because of the names listed in the court order. Most of them appeared from the beginning to be just potential target, not real victims, not really being hacked, or at least there was not evidence in the court order. Among these, there were like former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi and President of the European Central Bank, former Governor of Bank of Italia, Mario Draghi. So because of these names, despite the fact that in the court order there was no evidence of the hacking of such profiles, most headlines and attention focused on the high-level potential victims. Letting people think that all the listed names were being hacked. And I think this is also a little media case study, like how things at the beginning, when a news breaks in, could go a little bit wrong. But now we are here because while the news was still developing, some security researchers focused on the most interesting part of the news, maybe together with the psychological profiles of the two main suspects. That was the malware, right? And actually also the Italian investigation was based, or at least kicked off from an analysis of the malware. So in the aftermath of the news, some researchers from Reacta, Trend Micro, and later on also Kaspersky, TG Software,